John Wayne stood with his arms crossed, watching a 33-year-old man move for exactly 10 seconds. Then the last real cowboy in Hollywood turned to his crew and said 5 words that nobody on that Warner Brothers backlot expected to hear. What happened next didn't just change one Western film, it changed how action movies were made for the next 50 years. July 1973, Warner Brothers Studio, Burbank, California. The temperature hit 104 degrees on the dusty Western set built to look like an 1880s frontier town. This was John Wayne's territory, his world. The last place where old Hollywood still made movies the way they were supposed to be made. Wayne was 66 years old and still a giant. At 6'4", he towered over most men. He'd made over 170 films, won an Oscar for True Grit 4 years earlier. He was the Duke, the American cowboy, the last connection to an era when fights were settled with fists and 6-shooters, not kung fu and wire work. But Hollywood was changing. Bruce Lee had just died 3 weeks earlier. Martial arts movies were exploding in popularity. Young audiences wanted something different, something faster, more technical than the old barroom brawls Wayne had been doing for 40 years. The studio executives were nervous. They needed Wayne's star power, but they also needed the film to feel modern enough for 1973 audiences. That's why they called Chuck Norris. Chuck was 33 years old, 6-time world karate champion. He'd recently appeared in Bruce Lee's Return of the Dragon. Chuck wasn't famous yet. He ran karate schools in California, had a quiet reputation as perhaps the most technically perfect fighter America had produced. The studio hired him as fight choreographer, not to star, just to make the fight scenes feel more dynamic without losing the Western authenticity Wayne demanded. Nobody told John Wayne about this decision until Chuck showed up on set. It was 9:15 a.m. when Chuck's pickup truck pulled into the Warner Brothers lot. He was dressed simply: jeans, t-shirt, work boots. He looked like any other crew member. That was intentional. The assistant director met Chuck and walked him toward the main set. "Mr. Wayne doesn't know you're here yet," the AD said quietly. "You might want to stay low-key." Chuck nodded. This wasn't his set. This was John Wayne's world. They reached the main set where Wayne was blocking a saloon fight with the director. 3 bad guys corner the hero. The hero fights his way out. Classic Western brawl. Wayne was demonstrating how he wanted it choreographed. Old school, big haymakers, obvious grabs and throws, fighting that played big on camera and could be shot safely. Chuck watched from behind the camera equipment, staying quiet. He could see what they were building: competent, safe, old-fashioned. But it would look dated compared to martial arts films. No precision, no speed. The director called for a break. That's when producer Richard Brenner approached Wayne with Chuck following behind. "Duke, got a minute?" Wayne turned, saw Brenner, and his expression was already skeptical. "What is it, Richard?" "I want you to meet someone. This is Chuck Norris, 6-time world karate champion. We've brought him on to help design the fight sequences." The silence that followed was heavy. Wayne's face showed nothing, but everyone recognized the stillness. The Duke was not pleased. Wayne looked at Chuck, then back at Brenner. "We've got Mike Cullen. Mike's been doing my fight scenes for 15 years. Why exactly do we need a karate champion on a Western?" Brenner was sweating. The studio thinks adding some modern choreography could make the action scenes more dynamic without losing the Western feel. "Modern choreography," Wayne repeated flatly. "You mean karate?" "Not necessarily karate, but more technical." "Richard," Wayne interrupted, "we don't need fancy karate kicks in a cowboy movie. Cowboys fought in bars. That's what audiences expect." Chuck had stayed quiet through this exchange, but now he spoke, his voice calm and respectful. "Mr. Wayne, I'm not here to put karate in your Western. I'm here to make sure the fights look real." Wayne turned to look at him properly for the first time. They look real now. They look like Western fights, Chuck said. But fights have evolved. Audiences have seen better. They've seen faster. I can show you how to keep the Western feel but make it look like your character actually knows how to fight, not just how to throw haymakers. Wayne's jaw tightened. The crew had gone silent, sensing confrontation. Mike Cullen looked uncomfortable, caught between his 15-year relationship with Wayne and the studio's obvious desire to bring in fresh blood.
I know, but it's dangerous.
You think I don't know how to stage a fight?
Intensity.
Wayne asked,
We don't need
his
fancy
voice
karate
quiet
kicks
but
in a
dangerous.
cowboy movie.
I think you know exactly how to stage a fight for
I'm here to make
1953,
sure the
Chuck
fights
said,
look real.
not backing down but keeping his tone respectful. I'm talking about 1973. For a moment, nobody breathed. You didn't challenge John Wayne on his own set, but Wayne didn't explode. Instead, he studied Chuck more carefully. You got a lot of confidence for someone I've never heard of. I don't have confidence, sir. I have skill. There's a difference. Something flickered in Wayne's eyes. All right, Chuck Norris, show me what you got. Right here, right now. The producer started to intervene. Duke, maybe we should… No, Wayne cut him off. He wants to tell me my fights look old. Let's see what he can do better. Chuck nodded slowly. He'd known this was coming the moment Brenner introduced him. Wayne wasn't going to accept some outsider based on credentials or reputation. He needed to see it, and Wayne was testing him. If Chuck did something flashy and unrealistic, Wayne would dismiss him immediately. If Chuck couldn't deliver, he'd be off the set by lunch. What do you want to see? Chuck asked. The scene we just blocked out. 3 guys in a bar. Show me how Chuck Norris would fight 3 guys in a bar without it looking like a kung fu movie. Chuck looked around the set. He pointed to 3 stunt guys. You, and you. Come here. The 3 men approached nervously. Chuck positioned them quickly. You're going to come at me like you want to start a fight. Real aggression. I need it to look real. He turned to Wayne. The old way, you wind up big so the camera sees it. That works, but it makes your character look slow. A real fighter would be efficient, fast, brutal. That's what I'm going to show you. Wayne said nothing, just watched. Chuck positioned himself near the bar. The 3 stunt guys spread out around him, creating the scene geometry. The crew had stopped working entirely now. Everyone was watching. Even the director had moved closer. Whenever you're ready, Wayne said. The first stunt guy moved in, throwing a realistic-looking punch. What happened in the next 10 seconds made everyone on that set forget how to breathe. Chuck's movement wasn't flashy. It wasn't spinning kicks or flying through the air. It was something else entirely. Pure efficiency. He slipped the first punch with minimal movement, grabbed the man's extended arm, and used his own momentum to send him crashing into a table. The table splintered convincingly. 1 second, maybe 2. The second guy came in fast. Chuck blocked, redirected, landed a controlled punch to the solar plexus that looked devastating, but was perfectly pulled, and followed with a throw that sent the stuntman spinning into a chair. 3 seconds total. The third guy tried to grab him from behind. Chuck dropped his weight, broke the grip with a technique so fast and precise that most people couldn't follow it, and finished with a controlled strike that stopped 1 inch from the man's throat. 2 seconds. Total elapsed time. 7 seconds. Maybe 8. But it wasn't the speed that stunned everyone. It was how it looked. It looked real. It looked brutal. It looked exactly like what would happen if a truly dangerous man fought 3 amateurs in a bar. No fancy spinning, no high kicks, no wire work, just devastating, efficient violence delivered with perfect technical control. And it looked like something a cowboy would do. A cowboy who actually knew how to fight. Chuck straightened up, breathing normally, and looked at Wayne. That's what I'm talking about. Same scene, same setting. But now your character looks like he's the most dangerous man in that saloon, not just the biggest. The set was completely silent. The 3 stunt guys were picking themselves up, grinning. They'd felt how controlled Chuck had been. Wayne hadn't moved. His arms were still crossed. He stared at Chuck for what felt like forever. Then he turned to the crew and said 5 words. "Hire him. Right now. Today." He turned back to Chuck. "That wasn't karate. That was something else. That was practical fighting, sir. Everything I showed you can be taught to your actors. Everything will look real on camera, and everything fits a Western, because real fighting doesn't change based on what century you're in." Wayne was nodding slowly.
Chuck,
"How long
this
have you
take
been
has to
doing
be
this?"
real. I know, but
"Training
it's
since I was
dangerous. We
18,
need
sir.
that intensity.
Competing for
We don't
15
need
years.
fancy karate
Teaching
kicks in
for
a
10.
cowboy movie.
No, I mean, how long have you been making movies?"
I'm here to make sure
"This is my
the
second
fights
film
look
job,
real.
sir. I'm not a movie star. I'm a fighter who knows how to make fights look real." Wayne turned to Mike Cullen. "Mike, you've been with me a long time. You're still my stunt coordinator, but I want Chuck here, working with you on every fight in this film. You plan the stunts, the falls, the safety. Chuck makes it look like I know what the hell I'm doing." Mike Cullen, to his credit, wasn't offended. He was grinning. "Did you see that? Duke, he just showed us what we've been doing wrong for 20 years. Wayne allowed himself a small smile. "I saw it." He looked at Chuck again. "You just showed me what the next 20 years of action movies are going to look like, and you did it in 10 seconds. He gestured to the producer. "Richard, tear up whatever contract you offered him. Double it. I want to learn everything this kid knows." The set erupted. The director was already talking about reshooting previous fights. Mike Cullen was introducing Chuck to the stunt team. But Wayne pulled Chuck aside for a moment, away from the chaos. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, sir." "Why didn't you do any of that fancy stuff? I've seen martial arts movies. Why didn't you show me spinning kicks?" Chuck thought about his answer. "Because you didn't need to see what I can do, sir. You needed to see what would work for your film. Spinning kicks are impressive, but they're not believable in a bar fight." Wayne was quiet. "You're smart." He paused. "I'm 66 years old. I just watched someone half my age show me I've been doing it wrong. That should make me angry, but it doesn't. You know why? Because you're right. Times change. And if I keep making movies the same way I did in 1953, I'm not respecting the audience." He extended his hand. "Welcome to the picture, Chuck." They shook hands. Wayne's grip was still strong, still commanding. "One more thing," Wayne added. "In about 10 years, guys like you are going to completely take over action movies. Martial arts, precise fights, technical excellence. My era is ending. I can feel it. But I'll tell you something. I'm glad it's ending with someone like you showing us how it should be done. Because at least I know the future is in good hands." Chuck didn't know what to say to that. "Now get to work," Wayne said. "You've got a whole movie to fix." The next 6 weeks of production became legendary. Chuck didn't just choreograph fights, he trained the actors. He showed John Wayne techniques that made him move differently on camera. Not karate, not kung fu. Just efficient, realistic combat that made Wayne's character look more dangerous than he'd ever looked before. The film wrapped in September. Wayne pulled Chuck aside on the last day. "You changed how I think about action movies," Wayne told him. "I'm 66. I've probably got 1, maybe 2 more films in me. But because of what you taught me, those films are going to be better than anything I've done before." Chuck was 33 years old. He'd just learned from one of Hollywood's greatest legends that respecting the past while building the future was the only way forward. John Wayne died in June 1979, 6 years after that day on the Warner Brothers backlot. Before he died, he gave an interview to a film magazine. The interviewer asked him about the changing nature of action movies and the rise of martial arts cinema. Wayne's answer was preserved. "I met Chuck Norris in 1973 on a Western set. I was skeptical. I thought martial arts would ruin Westerns, make them unrealistic. Then Chuck showed me a 10-second demonstration of what real fighting looked like, and I realized everything I thought I knew about action scenes was outdated. Chuck didn't make Westerns worse, he made them honest. He showed me that technique and authenticity weren't enemies of entertainment. They were the future of it. The interviewer asked if Wayne was bothered by the fact that the new generation of action stars were martial artists rather than traditional actors. Bothered? Wayne said. Hell no, I'm relieved. Because guys like Chuck Norris care about getting it right. They care about making fights look real, making danger feel genuine. That's what I've been trying to do my whole career. The fact that they can do it better than I ever could, that doesn't diminish what I did. It honors it, because they're continuing the tradition of making audiences believe what they're seeing. The interviewer pressed, but aren't you concerned your style of filmmaking will be forgotten? Wayne was quiet for a moment. My style already is forgotten. That's not an insult. That's evolution. I represented something that made sense for its time. But times change. The kids watching movies today want something different. They want speed, precision, technical excellence. And you know what? They should have it. Because Chuck Norris and guys like him have earned the right to define what action movies mean for their generation. Any regrets? The interviewer asked. Just one, Wayne said. I wish I'd met Chuck 20 years earlier. Imagine what we could have made together. Mike Cullen, the original stunt coordinator who worked on that film, lived until 2003. In his final interview for a documentary about Hollywood stunt work, he was asked about that day. I'd worked with John Wayne for 15 years, Mike said, but I never saw him respect someone that fast. Chuck did this 10-second demonstration, and Wayne immediately understood he was watching the future. And instead of fighting it, Wayne embraced it. That's what made him great. What was the most impressive part? The interviewer asked. The restraint. Chuck could have done flashy moves to impress us. He didn't. He showed us exactly what we needed. Practical, realistic fighting. That's intelligence. That's why Wayne hired him immediately. The film Chuck worked on with John Wayne wasn't a massive hit. It made money, but it didn't set box office records. But it influenced dozens of action directors who saw it and recognized something different in how the fights were staged. 5 years later, Chuck Norris would star in Good Guys Wear Black. 10 years later, he'd be one of the biggest action stars in the world. But he never forgot July 1973 on that dusty Warner Brothers backlot when John Wayne, the last real cowboy, watched him move for 10 seconds and recognized the changing of the guard. That's what real legends do. They don't cling to the past. They recognize excellence when they see it, even when it represents the end of their era. John Wayne could have dismissed Chuck Norris, could have refused to adapt, could have demanded his movies stay exactly as they'd always been. Instead, he said 5 words. Hire him, right now, today. And with those 5 words, he welcomed the future of action cinema.